The snow came down so hard that Amelia Walsh could no longer see her own hands stretched out before her. And somewhere in the white chaos, she had lost all sense of direction, all hope of finding her way back to anything remotely resembling shelter. The winter of 1884 had arrived in Montana territory with a vengeance that nobody could have predicted. Amelia had lived through harsh winters before, growing up on the outskirts of Walla Walla in Washington territory, but this storm had caught her completely unprepared. She had been traveling alone from Helena, trying to reach a distant cousin's homestead near the Yellowstone River, when the blizzard had swept in with terrifying speed. Her hired wagon driver had panicked when the horses spooked, and in the chaos of trying to control the animals, Amelia had been thrown from the wagon. By the time she had gotten to her feet, the wagon was gone, swallowed by the white wall of snow. That had been hours ago. Or maybe it had only been minutes. Time had lost all meaning in the howling wind and biting cold. Amelia's thick wool coat, which had seemed so adequate back in Helena, now felt as thin as paper against the brutal temperature. Her fingers had gone numb inside her gloves, and her feet felt like blocks of ice in her leather boots. She kept moving because stopping meant death, though she had no idea if she was walking in circles or heading deeper into the wilderness. Her mind began to play tricks on her. She thought she heard voices in the wind, saw shapes in the swirling snow that vanished when she tried to focus on them. The cold was seeping into her bones, making her thoughts sluggish and confused. She stumbled over something hidden beneath the snow and fell hard, the impact driving the breath from her lungs. For a moment she just lay there, tempted to close her eyes and rest, just for a moment. No. She forced herself back to her feet, swaying as the wind tried to knock her down again. Her father had not raised her to give up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Thomas Walsh had been a stubborn man, a blacksmith who had brought his family west in search of opportunity, and had found it through sheer determination and hard work. He had taught Amelia to be strong, to fight when others would surrender. She would not dishonor his memory by lying down in the snow to die, but strength of will could only carry her so far. Her legs were becoming harder to move, each step requiring more effort than the last. Her lungs burned with each breath of frigid air. She could no longer feel her face, and ice had formed in her eyelashes, making it even harder to see through the blinding snow. Then she heard something that was not the wind, a sound that cut through the storm with unmistakable clarity. A horse's whinny, close by. Amelia tried to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper, torn away by the gale before it could travel more than a few feet. She forced herself to move toward where she thought the sound had come from, praying it had been real and not another trick of her failing mind. The shape that emerged from the white chaos was so sudden that Amelia cried out in surprise and fear. A massive horse, dark against the snow, with a rider hunched against the wind. The rider pulled the horse to a stop just feet from where Amelia stood frozen in place, and through the driving snow she could make out a man's face, weathered and strong, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of a snow-covered hat. "You're coming home," the cowboy said, his voice firm and commanding, brooking no argument. Before Amelia could respond, before she could even process what was happening, he had dismounted and was wrapping something warm around her shoulders. A heavy coat, still containing the heat from his body. Then his arms were around her, lifting her up with surprising strength, and she was being settled onto the horse's back. Everything after that became a blur of sensation and half-formed images. The warmth of the horse beneath her, the solid presence of the cowboy as he mounted behind her, one arm around her waist to hold her steady. The rhythmic movement of the horse as it carried them through the storm, The cowboy somehow navigating with confidence through conditions that had left Amelia completely lost. She leaned back against his chest, too exhausted and cold to worry about propriety, grateful for the warmth and the strength that seemed to radiate from him. Time passed in a strange, dreamlike way. At some point, Amelia realized she must have lost consciousness because she had no memory of arriving anywhere. But now she was being carried again, and there were walls around her, blocking the wind. Voices spoke above her head, women's voices joining the deeper rumble of the cowboy who had found her. Then she was being lowered onto something soft, and gentle hands were removing her frozen boots, her ice-stiffened coat. "Get those blankets heated by the fire quickly now," a woman's voice said, urgent but controlled. "Sarah, fetch the hot water and clean cloths. We need to warm her slowly, not too fast or it will damage the tissue." Amelia wanted to say something, to thank these people who were helping her, but her mouth would not form the words. She felt herself being wrapped in layers of warmth, felt the blessed relief as sensation began to return to her frozen limbs. With it came pain, a burning, tingling agony that made her gasp and cry out. "I know it hurts, dear, but that's good. That means there's no serious frostbite," the woman's voice said, closer now. A cool hand touched Amelia's forehead, brushing back her hair. "You're safe now. My son found you just in time." Son. The cowboy who had rescued her was this woman's son. Amelia tried to open her eyes, managed to get them halfway open. The room was warm and dimly lit, the glow of a fireplace providing most of the illumination. She could make out figures moving around her, could feel the bed beneath her and the weight of multiple blankets piled on top of her. "Will she be all right, Ma?" The cowboy's voice, coming from somewhere to her left. Now that they were out of the storm, Amelia could hear it properly. It was a good voice, deep and steady, with an accent that spoke of someone who had spent most of his life outdoors. "She'll be fine, Harrison, thanks to you. Another hour in that storm and we would have been preparing a burial instead of a recovery." There was pride in the woman's voice and relief. "What on earth were you doing out in such weather?" Checking the North Line shack. "Good thing, too, or I never would have found her." A pause. "She was just standing there in the snow, Ma, not even trying to find shelter, just standing like she had given up." "Well, she's got fight in her yet. Look at her eyes, she's trying to stay conscious." The woman's face came into view, lined with age but still handsome, with kind eyes that reminded Amelia of her own mother. "Don't fight it, dear. Sleep now. You're safe in the Zeller house and no harm will come to you here." Amelia wanted to resist, wanted to stay awake and understand where she was and who these people were, but the warmth and exhaustion were too much. She felt herself sliding into darkness, and this time she did not fight it. When she woke again, pale sunlight was streaming through a window and the storm had passed. Amelia lay still for a moment, taking inventory of her body. Everything hurt, a deep ache that seemed to go all the way to her bones, but she could move her fingers and toes, could feel her face again. She was wearing a nightgown that was not her own, soft flannel that smelled of lavender and wood smoke. The room was small but well kept, with plain wooden furniture and simple decorations. A rocking chair sat near the window, and someone had draped her clothing over it to dry. Her coat, her dress, her stockings, all arranged carefully. A pitcher and basin sat on a dresser, and next to the bed was a small table with a glass of water. Amelia pushed herself up slowly, wincing at the protest from her muscles. Her head swam briefly, then cleared. She reached for the water and drank it down gratefully, soothing her parched throat. As she set the empty glass back down, the door opened and the woman from the night before entered, carrying a tray. "Oh, good, you're awake," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Clara Zeller." You've been sleeping for nearly 14 hours, which is exactly what you needed." She set the tray down on the table, revealing a bowl of hot porridge, bread with butter, and another glass of water. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of cattle," Amelia admitted, her voice hoarse. "But alive. Thanks to you and your son. Thanks to Harrison, yes, though the good Lord deserves credit too for putting him on that path at just the right moment." Clara pulled the rocking chair closer to the bed and sat down. "Now, when you're ready, I'd like to know what a young woman was doing out alone in such a storm. But first, eat. You need your strength back." Amelia obeyed, suddenly ravenous. The porridge was perfect, sweetened with honey and rich with cream. As she ate, she told Clara her story. How she had been living in Helena for the past year, working as a teacher in a small schoolhouse. How her distant cousin, Elizabeth Moore, had written inviting her to come stay at the homestead, promising Amelia a position teaching the children of several local families who were too far from town for regular schooling. How she had hired what seemed like a reliable driver to take her the distance, but the man had lost control when the storm hit. "I don't even know if he survived," Amelia said quietly. "The horses were terrified and everything happened so fast. One moment I was in the wagon, the next I was in the snow and they were gone." Clara's expression was grave. "Harrison said he found no sign of a wagon or horses when he brought you in. The storm covered everything quickly. When the weather clears enough, he and some of the other men will search, but—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Amelia set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. She had hired that driver, had insisted on making the journey despite warnings about the unpredictable winter weather. If the man had died, it was because of her stubbornness. "Don't do that to yourself," Clara said gently, seeming to read her thoughts. "You didn't summon that storm. These things happen out here, tragic as they are. What matters now is that you survived, and we'll do everything we can to help you get to your cousin's place once it's safe to travel." "Where exactly am I?" Amelia asked. "The Zeller Ranch, about 30 miles southeast of Helena. We run cattle, have about 200 head right now, though we'll lose some to this storm, no doubt. It's just me, my son Harrison, my daughter Sarah, and our ranch hand, an old-timer named Dutch who's been with us since my husband was alive." "Your husband passed." Clara's face softened with an old sadness. 6 years ago. Died breaking a horse that should never have been broken. Too much wild spirit in that animal, too much fight. But Henry always thought he could handle anything. She shook her head slightly. "Harrison was just 20 when it happened. Had to become the man of the house overnight, and he's done a fine job of it. This ranch is twice as prosperous as it was when Henry was alive, though I shouldn't speak ill of the dead. My husband was a dreamer, you see. Harrison is a doer." Before Amelia could respond, there was a knock on the door, followed by a young woman's voice. "Ma, is she awake? Can I come in?" "Come in, Sarah," Clara called. The door opened to reveal a girl of perhaps 16, with her mother's kind eyes and a mass of brown curls barely contained by a ribbon. She carried a pile of clean linens and had the eager, curious expression of someone desperate for news of the outside world. "Oh, you are awake. I'm so glad. We were so worried. Harrison said you looked half frozen to death when he found you. I'm Sarah." She set the linens down on the dresser and came closer, her eyes bright with interest. "Where are you from? What's Helena like? Is it true they have electric lights in some of the buildings now?" "Sarah, let the poor woman breathe," Clara said with amusement. "She's barely been awake 10 minutes. "It's all right," Amelia said, managing a smile. "I don't mind. Helena is growing fast, yes. Some of the bigger buildings do have electric lights, though most places still use oil lamps and candles. It's quite a sight to see, though, the lights that don't flicker." Sarah's face lit up with fascination, and for the next few minutes, Amelia answered her questions about life in the territorial capital, describing the shops and the theater and the variety of people who passed through. Clara watched with an indulgent expression, clearly used to her daughter's hunger for information about the wider world. They were interrupted by the sound of heavy boots in the hallway, and then a knock, more firm than Sarah's had been. "Ma, I'm heading out with Dutch to check on the herd," a man's voice called through the door. "Harrison." Amelia felt her pulse quicken slightly, remembering the strength of his arms as he had lifted her onto his horse, the certainty in his voice when he had told her she was coming home. "Come in, Harrison. Don't shout through the door," Clara called. "Miss Walsh is awake and decent." The door opened and Harrison Zeller stepped into the room, and Amelia got her first clear look at the man who had saved her life. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of someone who worked hard every day. His face was weathered from years of sun and wind, making it hard to judge his age precisely, though she guessed he was close to her own 24 years. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, direct and intelligent, and his dark hair was still damp from washing. He had cleaned up since last night, trading his storm clothes for a clean shirt and trousers, though he still wore his boots and had a heavy coat over one arm. "Miss Walsh," he said with a slight nod, his eyes meeting hers for a moment before he looked away, a faint color rising in his cheeks. "Glad to see you're doing better." "Thanks to you, Mr. Zeller," Amelia said. "I owe you my life, if you hadn't found me when you did." "No need for that," Harrison said quickly, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone would have been skilled enough to navigate back through that storm," Amelia said firmly. "Thank you." Harrison shifted his weight, clearly not accustomed to being the center of attention, especially from a woman he had just met. "Well, you're welcome then. Ma, I was just saying, Dutch and I are going to check the south pasture, see how many head we lost. Might be gone most of the day." "Be careful," Clara said. "The drifts will be deep, always." Harrison nodded to Amelia again. "Madam." Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the hallway. Sarah giggled. "He's terrible with women," she confided to Amelia in a stage whisper. "Gets all tongue-tied and red in the face. You should see him at the church socials. All the girls trying to talk to him and him finding excuses to go check on the horses." "Sarah, hush," Clara said, but she was smiling. "Though it's true enough, my son is better with cattle than conversation." Amelia found herself smiling too, though she also felt a strange little flutter in her chest at the thought of Harrison being awkward around women. There had been something in the way he had looked at her, just for that brief moment, that had made her breath catch. Over the next few days, Amelia recovered her strength under Clara's careful attention. The ranch house was well built and warm, with thick log walls and a large stone fireplace in the main room. Besides the bedrooms, there was a kitchen where Clara performed wonders with limited ingredients, a small room that served as Dutch's quarters, and a root cellar packed with supplies for the winter. The storm had indeed been devastating. Harrison and Dutch spent long days riding the range, counting losses and helping cattle that had gotten trapped in drifts. The final count was 32 head lost, a significant blow but not a catastrophic one. Harrison accepted the news with grim resignation, already planning how they would rebuild the herd in the spring. Amelia found herself watching for Harrison's return each evening, though she told herself it was simple gratitude that made her heart lift when she heard his horse outside. He was often exhausted when he came in, his face raw from the wind, ice in his beard. But he always stopped to wash up and change before dinner, appearing at the table clean and polite if quiet. The dinner conversations were pleasant, with Clara and Sarah carrying most of the discussion, while Harrison and Dutch ate steadily and contributed the occasional comment. Amelia learned that Dutch had been a trapper in his younger days, had traveled all through the Rocky Mountains before settling into ranch work. He was perhaps 60, with a face like old leather and hands gnarled from decades of hard use, but his eyes were sharp, and he had a dry wit that made even Harrison smile. One evening, about a week after Amelia's rescue, Harrison surprised everyone by addressing her directly. "Miss Walsh, I was wondering about your plans. You were trying to reach your cousin's homestead when the storm hit. That's the Moore place near the Yellowstone." "Yes," Amelia said, setting down her fork. "Elizabeth Moore is my mother's cousin's daughter. We've corresponded for years but never met. She married a homesteader and they've been out here for 5 years now." "I know the place," Harrison said. "Good people, the Moores. They've built up a decent spread. It's about 3 days' ride from here, though, maybe more in winter conditions." "I hate to impose on your family any longer," Amelia said. "You've all been so kind, but I should make arrangements to continue my journey as soon as possible." Clara made a sound of protest. "Nonsense. You'll stay right here until the weather is reliable enough for travel. I won't have you risking yourself again." "Ma's right," Harrison said. "Another storm could blow in any time, and the passes will be treacherous with the drifts. Better to wait until things settle, maybe another few weeks." "But I can't impose on you for weeks," Amelia protested. "You're not imposing," Sarah said eagerly. "It's wonderful having another woman here, someone closer to my age than Ma. Please stay, at least through Christmas. It's only 3 weeks away." Amelia looked around the table at the faces that had become familiar over the past week. Clara's warm maternal concern, Sarah's bright enthusiasm, Dutch's quiet approval, and Harrison, his blue-gray eyes steady on hers, something in his expression that made her pulse quicken. "If you're sure," she said slowly, "I could help with the housework, earn my keep. I'm a good cook and I can sew and mend." "Then it's settled," Clara said with satisfaction. "You'll stay through Christmas at least, and we'll see about getting you to the Moore place after the new year, when travel is safer." That night, lying in bed in the small room that had become hers, Amelia stared at the ceiling and tried to understand the confused tangle of feelings inside her. She should be anxious to reach Elizabeth's homestead, to begin the teaching position that had been promised. Instead, she found herself relieved at the prospect of staying here longer, in this warm house with these kind people, with Harrison. She barely knew him. They had exchanged perhaps a few dozen words total since that first night. He was often gone during the day, and in the evenings he was quiet, more listener than talker. But there was something about him that drew her attention, made her aware of his presence in a way she had never experienced before. The way he moved, economical and sure. The rare smile that transformed his weathered face. The gentleness in his hands when he handled the animals, the way the ranch dogs followed him adoringly. And the memory, growing softer with time but still vivid, of his arms around her as they rode through the storm, the certainty in his voice when he had told her she was coming home. Amelia had been courted before, back in Walla Walla and then again in Helena. She was pretty enough, with dark hair and gray eyes and a figure that drew appreciative glances. But none of the men who had expressed interest had made her feel the way Harrison Zeller did with just a glance. None of them had made her heart race or her hands tremble. It was foolish, she told herself. She was here temporarily, a guest recovering from a near-fatal accident. Harrison had saved her life out of basic human decency, not because of any special feeling for her. He probably thought of her as just another responsibility, Another thing to worry about on a ranch that already demanded all his attention. But then, she remembered the color rising in his cheeks when his mother and sister had teased him about being awkward with women. The way his eyes had lingered on her face for just a moment longer than necessary. And she wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, she was not the only one feeling something unexpected. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the sun brilliant on the snow-covered landscape. After breakfast, Clara suggested that Amelia might enjoy getting some fresh air, as she had been cooped up in the house for over a week. "Just stay close," Clara warned. "The snow is deep and it's easy to lose your bearings." Amelia bundled up in borrowed clothes, including a heavy coat that Clara said had belonged to her late husband, and stepped outside. The cold hit her like a physical force, making her gasp, but after a moment it felt invigorating rather than threatening. The sky was a deep, brilliant blue, not a cloud in sight. Icicles hung from the eaves of the house and barn, glittering like crystal in the sunlight. She walked carefully through the trampled snow toward the barn, curious to see where Harrison spent so much of his time. The big double doors were partially open and she could hear movement inside, the soft sounds of animals and someone working. "Hello," she called out, not wanting to startle anyone. "In here," Harrison's voice responded. "Come on in, Miss Walsh." Amelia stepped into the dimness of the barn, blinking as her eyes adjusted. The space was large and well organized, with stalls along both sides and a hayloft above. The smell was surprisingly pleasant, a mixture of hay, leather, and animals. Several horses poked their heads out of stalls, regarding her with curious dark eyes. Harrison was in one of the stalls, brushing down a large bay horse. He looked over as she approached, his hands never stopping their steady rhythm. "Couldn't stand being cooped up anymore?" he asked, and there might have been the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Your mother suggested I get some air," Amelia said. She stopped at the stall door, watching him work. "I've been useless this past week, letting everyone wait on me. It feels wrong." "You were recovering." "That's not being useless, that's being sensible." Harrison moved to the horse's other side, continuing the grooming. "This is Ranger. He's the one who carried us both through the storm that night, steady as they come, even in the worst conditions." Amelia looked at the horse with new appreciation. "Then I owe him thanks as well." She hesitated, then asked, "May I pet him?" "Sure. Just let him smell your hand first, then stroke his neck. He's gentle." Amelia did as instructed, feeling the velvet softness of the horse's nose as he snuffled at her palm, then running her hand along his powerful neck. Ranger stood patiently, clearly accustomed to attention. "You miss it?" Harrison asked suddenly. "Teaching, I mean." "My mother said you were working as a teacher in Helena." "I do miss it," Amelia admitted. "There's something wonderful about watching a child's face when they finally understand something they've been struggling with, like watching a lamp being lit." She smiled at the memory. "Though I don't miss everything about it. Some of the parents could be difficult, and the schoolhouse was drafty and cold in winter." "What made you want to leave then? Come all the way out to Elizabeth Moore's place?" Amelia was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. There was something about Harrison's steady, patient presence that made her want to be honest. "Helena was becoming too settled for me," she said finally. "Too many social expectations, too many people trying to arrange my life. My landlady was constantly trying to introduce me to eligible men, hinting that I wasn't getting any younger and should be thinking about marriage." She shook her head. The position with Elizabeth offered escape from all that, a chance to teach without the pressure of small-town social politics. Harrison was quiet, his hand still working the brush through Ranger's coat. Finally, he said, "I can understand that. People thinking they know what's best for you, when really they're just trying to fit you into the shape they think you should be. There was something in his tone that made Amelia look at him more closely. Has that happened to you? Some. Ma wants to see me married, wants grandchildren. She doesn't push too hard, but I know she worries. Thinks I'm too isolated out here, that I should go into town more, socialize. He shrugged. But I'm not good at that sort of thing. I know cattle and horses. I know how to read the weather and the land. Put me in a room full of people making small talk and I'm lost. That doesn't seem like such a terrible thing, Amelia said softly. Knowing what you're good at and staying true to it. Harrison looked up then, his eyes meeting hers over Ranger's back, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. They were both people who did not quite fit the expected molds, who were more comfortable with honest work and open spaces than with the complicated dance of social expectations. No, Harrison said quietly. I suppose it isn't terrible at all. They stood there for a long moment, the silence comfortable rather than awkward, connected by something neither of them fully understood yet. Then Ranger shifted, breaking the spell, and Harrison cleared his throat. I should show you the rest of the horses, he said. We've got 8 in total, plus a few head of milk cows and the chickens. Not a large operation, but enough to keep us busy. For the next hour, Harrison showed Amelia around the barn and outbuildings, explaining the daily routines of ranch life. He was more talkative than she had ever heard him, growing animated as he discussed the horses and their different personalities, the challenges of maintaining a herd through the harsh Montana winters, his plans for expanding the ranch in the coming years. Amelia found herself fascinated, not just by the information but by Harrison himself. This was clearly his element, the place where he felt most comfortable and confident. The awkward, tongue-tied man from the dinner table was gone, replaced by someone articulate and passionate about his work. You really love this, she said as they walked back toward the house, their breath misting in the cold air. It's all I've ever wanted to do, Harrison admitted. Some men want to strike it rich in the gold fields or build business empires. I just want to raise good cattle, breed strong horses, build something that will last. He glanced at her sideways. Probably sounds boring to someone who's lived in places like Helena. It doesn't sound boring at all, Amelia said honestly. It sounds like you know exactly who you are and what you want. That's rarer than you might think. They reached the house, pausing on the porch. Harrison's cheeks were red from the cold, and there was a sparkle of frost in his dark hair. He looked at Amelia with an expression she could not quite read, opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. I should get back to work, he said instead. But thank you. For listening, I mean. I don't usually talk that much. I enjoyed it, Amelia said. Perhaps you could tell me more another time. About the ranch, I mean. She felt her own cheeks warming, and not from the cold. I'd like that, Harrison said, and this time there was definitely a smile, small but genuine. Then he touched his hat brim in a gesture that was somehow both old-fashioned and charming, and headed back toward the barn. Amelia went inside, where Clara took one look at her face and smiled knowingly, but said nothing. That afternoon, Amelia threw herself into helping with the housework, kneading bread dough with perhaps more vigor than necessary, trying to sort through the confusing mix of feelings that Harrison had stirred up. She was not supposed to feel this way. She was here by accident, an unexpected guest who would be moving on as soon as weather permitted. Getting attached to Harrison, letting herself develop feelings for him, was foolish at best and cruel at worst. He had his life here, his responsibilities. She had a job waiting for her at Elizabeth's homestead. Their paths had crossed by pure chance, and soon they would diverge again. but knowing all that did not stop her heart from lifting when Harrison came in for dinner that evening, did not prevent her pulse from quickening when their eyes met across the table. And judging by the way he seemed to have trouble looking away, by the deeper color in his cheeks, she suspected she was not alone in her confusion. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Amelia helped Clara with cooking and household chores in the mornings, learning to make do with the limited ingredients available on an isolated ranch. In the afternoons, when weather permitted, she would venture out to the barn, where Harrison seemed to always find tasks that required explanation or demonstration. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversation growing easier and more natural as the initial awkwardness faded. Sarah appointed herself Amelia's guide to ranch life, teaching her to milk the cows, showing her how to gather eggs from the irritable chickens without getting pecked, explaining the complex social hierarchy of the ranch dogs. Through Sarah's chatter, Amelia learned more about the Zeller family history, about Harrison's father and his death, about the struggles they had faced in the years since. "Harrison saved us," Sarah said one afternoon as she and Amelia hung laundry on lines strung across the warm kitchen. Outside it was snowing again, light flurries that drifted lazily from a gray sky. "After Pa died, people said we should sell the ranch, that Ma couldn't run it alone and Harrison was too young, but he just worked harder, learned everything he could. Dutch stayed on even though we couldn't pay him for the first year, said he owed Pa a debt and would see us through. Now the ranch is doing better than ever. Harrison is a good man, even if he doesn't always know how to show it." "He seems very dedicated," Amelia said carefully, trying to keep her voice neutral. "He's lonely too, though he'd never admit it," Sarah continued, pegging up one of her brother's shirts with sharp efficiency. "He needs someone who understands him, who won't try to change him into something he's not, someone who appreciates what he's built here." She said this last part with a significant look at Amelia, who felt her cheeks warming under the girl's knowing gaze. "Sarah, I'm only here temporarily," Amelia said gently. "As soon as the weather is stable enough, I'll be continuing on to your cousin's homestead." "Will you, though?" Sarah asked. "Or is that just what you think you're supposed to do?" It was an uncomfortably perceptive question from a 16-year-old, and Amelia did not have a good answer for it. She changed the subject and Sarah allowed it, but the words lingered in Amelia's mind. What did she want? When she had left Helena, she had been so certain of her path, so eager to escape to the independence and isolation of the homestead teaching position. But now, living here with the Zellers, being part of their daily lives, she found herself questioning those plans. She loved the warmth of this family, the sense of purpose in their work, the beauty of the wild landscape. And Harrison, quiet and steady and increasingly present in her thoughts, made her imagine possibilities she had never considered before. But it was too soon, too fast. She barely knew him, barely understood her own feelings. And yet, when she was honest with herself, she knew her heart had already made its choice. Reckless and foolish as that might be, Christmas approached, bringing with it a flurry of preparations. Clara and Sarah spent days baking, filling the house with the scents of cinnamon and ginger and cloves. Harrison and Dutch cut a tree from the forest, a tall pine that they set up in the corner of the main room. The whole family spent an evening decorating it with strings of popcorn and dried berries, paper ornaments that Sarah had made, and a few precious glass baubles that Clara said had come all the way from Germany, brought by her grandmother. Amelia contributed what she could, though she felt awkward accepting the family's generosity while having nothing to give in return. Her carpet bag with its few possessions had vanished with the wagon driver, leaving her with literally nothing but the borrowed clothes on her back. Don't fret about it, Clara said when Amelia mentioned this. Your presence is gift enough. It's done us all good, having someone new around, especially Harrison. I haven't seen him this animated in years. Christmas Eve dawned clear and bitterly cold, the kind of cold that made the snow squeak under boots and the air hurt to breathe. Inside, the house was warm and festive. Clara had outdone herself with dinner, producing a roast chicken with all the trimmings despite the limitations of their supplies. They ate at the big table in the main room, the Christmas tree glowing with candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. After dinner, they sat by the fire and Clara told stories of Christmases past, of Harrison and Sarah as children, of their father and his terrible habit of eating all the Christmas cookies before the actual day arrived. Sarah played the piano, a slightly out-of-tune upright that nevertheless filled the room with music. Even Dutch contributed, singing an old trapper's ballad in a surprisingly good baritone. Harrison sat slightly apart from the group, his long legs stretched toward the fire, seemingly content just to watch and listen. But Amelia noticed that his eyes kept drifting to her, and each time their gazes met, she felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. As the evening drew late and the fire burned low, Clara announced that she was tired and headed to bed. Sarah followed soon after, and Dutch excused himself to his room. Suddenly, Amelia and Harrison were alone in the flickering firelight, the silence between them full of unspoken things. I should go to bed as well, Amelia said, but she made no move to rise from her chair. In a minute, Harrison said. He leaned forward, adding another log to the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. I wanted to talk to you, alone, I mean. Amelia's heart began to race. All right. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. When he finally spoke, the words came slowly, as if he was choosing each one with care. When I found you in that storm, when I first saw you standing there in the snow, I thought I was seeing a ghost. You were so still, so pale. I thought I was too late, that you were already gone. He swallowed hard. Then you looked at me, and I saw you were still alive, still fighting, and I knew right then that I would do whatever it took to save you. He turned to face her then, his blue-gray eyes intense in the firelight. I've been trying to understand it these past weeks, trying to make sense of what I'm feeling. I'm not good with words, Amelia. I'm not good at this sort of thing at all. But I know that having you here, getting to know you, it's changed something for me. When I think about you leaving, about you going to the Moore place and me probably never seeing you again, it feels wrong. It feels like losing something I didn't even know I was looking for. Amelia could barely breathe. She had hoped, had wondered, but hearing him say it out loud was overwhelming. Harrison, I feel the same way. I've been trying not to, trying to be sensible, but I can't help it. When I'm with you, everything feels right in a way it never has before. Harrison stood up from his chair and crossed to kneel beside hers, taking her hands in his. His hands were warm and calloused, strong from years of hard work. Then don't go. Stay here, with me, with us. I know it's crazy, I know we barely know each other, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Stay, Amelia, please. Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. What about Elizabeth? She's expecting me, counting on me to teach those children. We'll send word, explain what happened. She'll understand. And there are children around here who need teaching too, families scattered across the territory who can't get their kids to a regular school. You could teach them. You could build something here, same as I have. Are you asking me to marry you? Amelia whispered. Harrison's grip on her hands tightened. Yes. I know it's too soon, I know I should court you properly, but we don't live in a world where there's time for all those niceties. This is the frontier, Amelia. Life is hard and uncertain, and when you find something real, something true, you hold on to it. So yes, I'm asking you to marry me, to be my wife, to build a life here with me. I can't promise you it will be easy, but I can promise you it will be real, and I will spend every day trying to make you happy." Amelia looked into his eyes, saw the vulnerability there, the hope and fear mingled together. This man who was so strong and capable was opening his heart to her, offering her everything he had. And she realized that this was what she had been searching for all along without even knowing it. Not escape, but home. Not solitude, but belonging. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Harrison, I'll marry you." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, transforming him. He pulled her up out of the chair and into his arms, holding her close. She could feel the steady beat of his heart, the strength of his embrace, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. "I love you," Harrison murmured against her hair. "God help me. I think I've loved you since that moment in the storm when you looked at me like I was your last hope in the world." "I love you too," Amelia said, pulling back just enough to look up at him. "You were my last hope, Harrison. You saved my life in more ways than one." He bent his head and kissed her, gentle at first, then with growing passion. Amelia melted into the kiss, wrapping her arms around his neck, feeling like she was finally, truly home. They were married 3 weeks later, as soon as the circuit preacher could make it to the ranch. It was a simple ceremony, held in the main room of the house with Clara and Sarah as witnesses and Dutch standing proud as Harrison's best man. Amelia wore a dress that had been Clara's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit. Harrison wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothes but unbearably handsome. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Harrison kissed her with a mix of reverence and barely restrained emotion that made Clara wipe tears from her eyes and Sarah sigh dramatically. Then there was a celebration, modest but joyful, with neighbors who had braved the winter cold to attend, bearing gifts of food and household goods to help the newlyweds start their life together. That night, in Harrison's bedroom, which was now their bedroom, Amelia lay in her husband's arms and marveled at how completely her life had changed in just 2 months. She had set out to escape social pressure and find independence, and instead she had found love, had bound herself to another person in the most permanent way possible. But it did not feel like a loss of independence. It felt like finding the other half of herself, the part she had not known was missing. Harrison made her stronger, not weaker. With him, she felt capable of anything. "No regrets?" Harrison asked softly, his hand stroking her hair. "None at all," Amelia said. "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner." He kissed her forehead. "But I'll take every day I get with you and be grateful." They made love that night with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, whispering words of love and commitment. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked about their plans for the future. Harrison wanted to expand the ranch, maybe build a larger house eventually, start a family. Amelia talked about setting up a small school in one of the outbuildings, teaching the scattered ranch children who had no other access to education. "We'll build it together," Harrison said. "Everything we do from now on, we do together." It was a promise he kept faithfully. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good, filled with the hard work and simple pleasures of frontier life. Amelia did set up her school, teaching a rotating group of children from neighboring ranches and homesteads. Harrison expanded the herd and the ranch's grazing land, earning a reputation as a skilled cattleman and an honest dealer. Their first child, a son they named Henry after Harrison's father, was born in the autumn of 1885, delivered by Clara with Sarah's assistance in the same bedroom where Amelia had recovered from her brush with death. Harrison wept when he held his son for the first time, overcome with a joy he had never expected to feel. 2 years later came a daughter, Grace, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue-gray eyes. Then another son, Thomas, named for Amelia's father. Sarah married a neighboring rancher's son and moved to her own homestead, though she visited often with her growing family. Clara remained at the ranch, doting grandmother to all the children, still helping with the endless work of running a household on the frontier. Dutch stayed on until his death in 1892, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 70. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, marking his grave with a simple stone that bore his name and the words, "Faithful Friend." Harrison mourned him deeply, having lost the closest thing he had to a second father. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1895, the Zeller holdings had tripled in size, and Harrison employed 4 full-time ranch hands to help manage the growing herd. Amelia's school had become a recognized institution, with students coming from as far as 50 miles away during the summer months. She even published a small primer for frontier education that was adopted by schools throughout Montana Territory. Montana achieved statehood in 1889, and the Zellers celebrated with their neighbors, feeling a deep pride in being part of this wild, beautiful place that was finally being recognized as an equal member of the Union. The frontier was slowly becoming less wild, with more towns springing up, railroads pushing farther into the territory, electricity and telephones beginning to appear even in remote areas. But the Zeller Ranch remained much as it had always been, a place of hard work and simple pleasures, of family and tradition, of connection to the land. Amelia never regretted her choice to stay, to build her life here rather than continuing on to Elizabeth's homestead. She and Elizabeth had eventually met and become friends, and Elizabeth had laughingly told her that she had clearly made the right choice, that any fool could see Harrison Zeller was desperately in love with his wife. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in the winter of 1905, Harrison took Amelia back to the spot where he had found her that long-ago night in the blizzard. The area was different now, with a line shack nearby and a well-worn trail, but the essential character of the place remained: wild, open, beautiful in its starkness. "This is where my real life began," Harrison said, his arm around Amelia's waist as they looked out over the snow-covered landscape. "The moment I saw you standing in that storm, everything before that was just preparation, just marking time. You rode through that storm and told me I was coming home," Amelia said, leaning into his warmth. "And I did come home. To you, to us, to this life we've built. No regrets." He asked, as he had on their wedding night all those years ago. "Not a single one," Amelia said. "You gave me everything I didn't know I wanted: love, family, purpose, belonging. You gave me a home, Harrison." He kissed her then, a kiss that held 20 years of love and commitment, of shared joys and weathered hardships, of a bond that had been forged in a moment of desperation and had only grown stronger with time. They rode back to the ranch together as the sun set, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Smoke rose from the chimney of their house, larger now than the original structure, expanded to accommodate their growing family. Through the windows they could see lamplight, and they could hear the sound of their children's voices, could imagine Clara in her rocking chair by the fire, could picture the warmth and life that waited inside. "Welcome home," Harrison said with a smile as they reached the barn, the same words he had spoken that first night, though the meaning was richer now, layered with years of shared history. "Welcome home," Amelia echoed, and they went inside together, to the family and the life they had built, to the love that had begun in a blizzard and had proved stronger than any storm. The years continued to unfold, bringing changes as all years do. The children grew into adults, each finding their own paths while remaining connected to the ranch that was their heritage. Henry took over the day-to-day management of the cattle operation, proving to have inherited his father's skill with animals and his mother's head for business. Grace became a teacher like her mother, eventually opening a proper schoolhouse in a nearby town that was growing into something substantial. Thomas, the youngest, struck out for the coast, drawn by tales of the timber industry and the endless forests of Washington and Oregon, though he always came home for Christmas. Clara lived to see all her grandchildren grown, passing peacefully in her sleep in 1908 at the age of 76. The whole county turned out for her funeral, a testament to the respect and affection she had earned over her years on the frontier. They buried her next to her husband Henry, reuniting them after nearly 3 decades apart. Harrison and Amelia grew old together, their hair going gray, their faces lining with age, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened, enriched by decades of shared experience, by the countless small moments that make up a life together. The way Harrison still brought Amelia coffee in bed on cold mornings, the way Amelia still touched Harrison's shoulder as she passed his chair, a wordless communication of affection and connection. On winter evenings they would sit by the fire, Harrison in his favorite chair with Amelia in hers close beside him, their hands clasped together, and they would talk about everything and nothing. About the day's work and the children's letters, about plans for the spring and memories of years past. About the night Harrison had ridden through a blizzard and found a woman standing alone in the snow, lost and freezing, and how that moment had changed everything. You ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't gone to check that line shack that night? Harrison asked once, his thumb stroking over Amelia's knuckles. If I'd stayed home, if I'd never found you, I try not to think about it, Amelia admitted, because I know I would have died out there. But more than that, I hate to think of all the years we would have missed, all the life we never would have built. I wouldn't have built anything, Harrison said quietly. Without you, I would have just kept working year after year until I was too old to work anymore. The ranch would have been successful, sure, but it wouldn't have been a home. It wouldn't have meant anything. You gave me a reason for all of it, Amelia. You gave me purpose beyond just survival. We gave each other that, Amelia said. I was running away when that storm hit, running from expectations and pressure, thinking I wanted to be alone. But I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to be seen, truly seen by someone who understood me. And you did, from that very first moment. You looked at me and you saw me, all of me, and you didn't try to make me into something else. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire, listening to the wind outside. It was snowing again, fat flakes drifting past the windows, but the house was warm and solid around them, a testament to everything they had built together. You're coming home, Harrison said suddenly, softly, repeating the words he had spoken that long ago night. Amelia smiled, squeezing his hand. I am home. I've been home for 40 years, and I'll be home for whatever years we have left. This is where I belong, Harrison. With you, always with you. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her weathered fingers with the same reverence he had shown when she was young. I love you, Amelia Zeller. From that moment in the storm until my last breath, I will love you. And I love you, Amelia said, her eyes bright with emotion. My rescuer, my husband, my home. They sat together as the night deepened, the fire burning low, two souls who had found each other against all odds and had built a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. Outside the storm raged, but inside there was only warmth and peace, the quiet contentment of two people who had found exactly what they needed in each other. The Zeller Ranch continued long after Harrison and Amelia were gone, passed down through generations, each adding their own chapter to the story. But the heart of it all, the foundation on which everything else was built, was that moment in the blizzard when a cowboy rode through the storm and brought home the woman who would become his world. Years later, when Henry's daughter was asked about the history of the ranch, she told the story that had been passed down, the tale of how her grandparents had met. "My grandfather found her in a blizzard," she said. "She was lost and freezing, and he brought her home. And she stayed, because she had finally found where she belonged. They loved each other until the very end, and even now when I walk past the place where they're buried side by side, I can feel that love. It's in the land itself, in every fence post and building, in the very air we breathe here. This ranch was built on love, and that's why it has endured." It was a good story, a true story, and one that would be told for generations to come. A reminder that sometimes the worst storms bring us exactly what we need, and that home is not a place but a person or people who see us for who we truly are and love us anyway. The end.